Bob Herbert's op-ed.tv is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation with the support of Ann Ulnick. Hi, I'm Bob Herbert. Welcome to op-ed.tv. Most of our presidents have lied to the public at one time or another, but we've never had a president who lies the way Donald Trump lies. He is the most colossal liar ever to set foot in the Oval Office. We'll talk about that with my guest, Eric Alterman, a distinguished professor of English at Brooklyn College, who is also the media columnist for The Nation magazine and the author of a first-rate new book, Lying in State: Why Presidents Lie and Why Trump is Worse. Eric, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. You know, we've already had an enormous number of books about Donald Trump. Why another one? Why did you feel compelled to write this book?
Thanks for asking, and thanks for having me. This is not a book about Donald Trump. It is and it isn't. It's a book I wrote because of Donald Trump. When Donald Trump was elected in 2016, I was as shocked as anyone. And I feared for the future of my country. And I said, what can I do? How can I answer for myself? What can I tell my one day when I have grandchildren? And the thing I knew was the history of presidential lying, because I had written a doctoral dissertation in a previous book on this subject. So that book just looked at 4 presidential lies that began at the end of World War II. This time I went back to the beginning of the country, to George Washington, and said, how do we get in this situation where we have a compulsive pathological liar as president and we treat him as normal? And what this book does is provide historical context in the context of lying for how Donald Trump could be president and what happens when a pathological liar becomes president. So I'd say 3/4 of it is about presidents before Donald Trump, and then the last quarter of it is all about Trump. First about his campaign and then about his presidency.
There was quite a bit that surprised me in this book, but whenever you do the kind of research that you've done, and you've done a ton of research on it, inevitably there are things that surprise the author. What surprised you about this one?
Going back and looking at lies from the very beginning, I was shocked by 2 things. One was the intensity of the focus on white supremacy in our country, and how many presidential lies derive from the need for a president to pretend to the country that all men are created equal, when in fact the country has no interest in treating all men as equal. And that trapped just about every president all the way through, certainly through Richard Nixon. And I would say Ronald Reagan as well. Maybe it skipped Jimmy Carter. And second is the intensity of the need for physical expansion of the country, first across the North American continent, then into empire, beginning with the war in the Philippines, which, by the way, appears to have killed more people than the Civil War in the United States did. And then empire became translated into the words national security. So we didn't talk about empire, we talked about our need for national security, and all kinds of lies under this guise. And it's my understanding of our history that this incredibly wide-ranging definition of national security trapped presidents who would prefer to tell the truth and not lie into telling lies, because they had to undertake actions which were inconsistent with America's ideas of themselves.
I mean, there's so many things that strike me about Donald Trump's lying, but he lies all the time. I mean, it really does seem like it's pathological. He lies about big things and small things, you know, there are consequences when you have an important leader who lies all the time. What are the things that most concern you about Trump's penchant for lying?
Well, there's two problems. One is the problem that we've had with all presidents who lie, which is that when a president lies, presidential rhetoric, presidential speech creates its own reality. And the media treat it as true, even if reporters know that it's false. So the president ends up responding to the false picture of reality that he's created rather than the problem that he was lying about. The clearest example of this, I suppose, is Lyndon Johnson in Vietnam. He created a picture of what had happened in Vietnam, beginning with the second Gulf of Tonkin incident that never happened. And he was constantly responding to the situation that he pretended was true, when in fact we were losing the war because he couldn't deal with the truth. So almost all presidents who lie have that problem. Interestingly, because people have stopped believing Donald Trump, he doesn't have that same kind of problem. When Donald Trump says something now, people don't automatically assume it's true. The media often report it as if it's true, but then the next day everyone forgets about it. I was quite struck when Donald Trump said that he had spoken to some great generals right after there was that explosion in Beirut, and they had told him it was almost certainly a bomb. And yet it wasn't a bomb. And everybody forgot that the president of the United States had said there had been a terrorist attack on a major city in the Middle East. Because that guy just is a moron. Now with Trump, we have a much more serious problem vis-a-vis lies. And that is he lies so much of what he says is lies. In fact, I would posit that more of what he says is false than true.
I completely agree with that.
So, and the media are incapable of handling this problem. They don't know what to do with it. They can't call the president a liar in every sentence, even though every sentence is a lie. Daniel Dale, the wonderful correspondent now for CNN, does it, but nobody else really does. And the net effect is that we have no idea what's true anymore in our society. That you can't believe anything. You can't believe the CDC. You can't believe the Department of Education. You can't believe the Department of Justice. Certainly can't believe the president, his spokespeople, or his advisors. And so people have given up, particularly Trump supporters, on the idea of truth or falsehood. And as Hannah Arendt wrote a long time ago, that's the fundamental precondition for dictatorship, when there's no such thing as truth. At that point, a leader can get away with anything he wants. And that's the path that Trump has taken us on, and that so many of the media have gone along with.
And I think that is such an enormous issue that doesn't get nearly enough attention, actually doesn't get much attention at all. I feel like that we are already well on the road to some form of authoritarianism. We see fascist behavior so often now. It's on television, but it's not characterized as such. There are profound doubts in the minds of many Americans about the legitimacy of the upcoming election, or at the very least, whether their votes will actually be counted. Can you talk a little bit about the threat that you see to this this Republican form of government that we have in the United States? I mean, it seems to me it's under real threat, but I'd like to hear how concerned you are about this.
Yeah, but I'm going to answer that. But first, I want to pull back slightly and talk about the problem of calling the president a liar. I have on the record editors-in-chief of the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal at the beginning of Trump's presidency. And they all say, even though they know that what he's saying is fundamentally false, they're reluctant to call the president a liar. The reason they give is that they don't know his intent. They can't read his mind. Maybe he believes the nonsense that he says. And in fact, I've seen Kellyanne Conway use exactly that defense, saying it's not a lie to him because he believes it, and you know that. She's like trying to shut up the reporter for even asking the question. Well, I don't care if he believes or not, or any president believes the lies. If they're false, and it's the president's responsibility to know the truth, then he's lying. If his aide lies and the president doesn't correct him, it's a lie. There's all kinds of ways to mislead the country, and those ways, if done with intent, are lies, whether or not he believes it or God told him or he's too lazy to find the truth or he's just the world's biggest narcissist, to take just a few of the examples of excuses we've gotten. Now, Trump, I mean, again, to go back to Vietnam for a second, Lyndon Johnson destroyed his presidency over Vietnam owing to the lies. Well, every single policy of Trump's is Vietnam, every single one. Everything he touches is based on lies and is a fundamental failure as a result, as far as the American people are going. The coronavirus is exposing that, but it's been true about everything. Puerto Rico, immigration policy, education policy, environmental policy, Middle East policy. So Trump is now applying that to the election, with the post office, with the voter suppression, with the violence against protesters, with not having
his assertion that the election is going to be rigged.
Right. It's I know you are, but what am I kind of thing from like sixth grade, not even. And the media are treating, well, the president says this and Nancy Pelosi says that. The president says this and
Right.
Joe Biden says that. But in fact, the president has no credibility at all. And every time these things are looked into, it's shown to be total nonsense. And it's done for the purposes of misleading the American people so that it becomes easier for him to steal the election. And it's a crisis of a kind we've never seen before in this country. You know, we never talked in the past. If you talked about American fascism, you were considered kind of crazy. And I tell you, the part in my book where I conclude that it's a genuine threat, I wrote it and took it out because I didn't want to sound crazy.
Right,
and then I put it back in because it's real. And now it's not. It doesn't sound so crazy once we had Trump demanding that the military turn gas people outside the White House. People kind of got the message. But people understand, many people in the media understand that Trump is what he is, but they don't know how to explain it to the American people. And they're constantly hamstrung by this enormous part of the media led by Fox News, which should not be treated as a media organization, which will just repeat the president's lies ad nauseum. In fact, suggests lies on the air to the president. It's a crazy situation. It would have been unimaginable before it happened.
The first of Trump's lies as a significant political figure, I guess, was the birther issue against Barack Obama. But he has seemed obsessed with the race issue from the time he's emerged on the public scene here. And he's so blatant, it seems to me, with however you want to characterize his approach to race, whether it's white nationalism or racism or, choose the term you want to choose. But it does seem that it's working, and we've seen it work with other presidents. And Trump won a majority of the white vote in 2016. The polls show that he's winning the white vote again now. What does that tell us about a majority of our white citizens? It's so clear that Trump is incompetent and not fit for the office, it seems to me. Does that mean that the race issue is so important that a majority of white voters would rather have an incompetent president than even give a little bit on this issue, or that they don't care about this profound threat to our democracy? What should we draw from this?
Well, you have to really dig down and deep into the data to be able to explain this and be confident of what your answer is. I've tried to do that. For instance, I didn't do the work, but I've read the studies about the Tea Party, and the Tea Party were all covered as if they objected to big government and taxes, when in fact it was primarily.
Yeah, take a look at the budget deficits now.
Yeah. Look, here's how I understand it after doing this research. Certainly, fear of a black planet is an important motivator for a lot of Trump supporters. But it's larger than that. First of all, it's not just race, it's religion. These are white Christians, 100%, who are supporting Trump. There are no white Muslims supporting Trump. Jews oppose Trump 70-30. which is a little low for Jews, actually. So he may be getting a little support on that. But what it is white Christian men have run this country forever, literally, since there were people on, since the Native Americans met them, since the Europeans started coming here. And that they fear is coming to an end. It began with the election of an literal African-American president, and the demographics tell them that there's going to be a minority soon. Nobody knows exactly when. And their lives suck, an awful lot of them. I mean, they're living in communities that have terrible opiate problems, that have very little future economically, and they're losing their sense of self and their hope for the future. So they're looking for people to blame. And Trump is saying, blame the blacks, blame the Jews, blame the immigrants, blame the Muslims, blame all people who don't look like you. And there are a lot of women who are in this camp because they want to live in this same world. They like being subservient to men. They believe in it maybe for religious reasons, or they just have been taught that this is how it should be, and this is how they know how to live. So all of these people are supporting Trump because they want to go back to a time where they were on top, and they're worried that that's being stolen from them. And that's what Trump and Breitbart and Fox and Rush Limbaugh and Bill O'Reilly are all telling them, that liberals are conspiring with George Soros and immigrants and LGBT people to take away what is rightfully theirs by subterfuge. The Jews are controlling the media, and they're undermining Trump. They're the enemies of the people. Same phrase used by Hitler and Stalin. And that message resonates because politics, in a lot of ways, is trying to find someone to blame, trying to find a common enemy.
You make it clear in your book that Donald Trump did not emerge in a vacuum. The Republican Party has essentially turned its back on reality in many ways for several decades now, and then they've promoted lies and from my view, some forms of madness for a long time. Can you talk a little bit about what's been going on in the GOP that more or less set the stage for the emergence of someone like Donald Trump?
Yeah. Well, I don't know how far back you want to go. I can go. You want me to go? I can go back to 1964, where.
Sure. Go back to '64. Go back to the Goldwater race against Lyndon Johnson.
Okay. Well, when
at a time when the Republicans, we thought, were that kind of thinking was soundly rejected.
Right. Well, it was soundly rejected at the time. And the people who felt themselves rejected thought to themselves, you know, we're never going to be, and in fact, back then, James Reston wrote a column in the New York Times saying the Republicans had better move to the left of the Democrats if they hope to survive, because their right-wing version was so unpopular. Right. And the people who funded these right-wing ideas and organizations, they decided, well, we're never going to get a fair hearing from the media for our ideas, and therefore we're never going to be in power if we don't get this fair hearing. So we need to build our own media. We need to build our own academic structure. We need to build our own institutions. And they started investing millions and later billions of dollars into building up their own media, their own think tanks, their own legal organizations like the Federal Society, which is picking all of our justices now for Trump. And they were very patient, and they took decades, but eventually they got it. Now, when Ronald Reagan was elected president, he had a lot of nutty ideas. But number one, he had the Heritage Foundation backing him up on those, which had been funded by these groups. And two, he had a media which the members of which were afraid of him. Ben Bradley is on record saying, we took down one president, and now we're being accused of, we didn't want to be accused of taking down another president from the right wing. The right wing already hates us. We don't understand how this clown was elected in the first place, so we need to go easy on it. And so Reagan could say all kinds of nonsense and not be challenged on it by the media on purpose. The next big step was Newt Gingrich taking over the Republican Party. Again, and if Newt were president, he would be lying just as much as Trump. The difference is that Newt would know that he is lying, and Trump doesn't seem to have any distinction between truth and lies. But Newt created a language for the Republicans to talk, which turned the Democrats into un-Americans, turned them into disloyal people, and you could say anything at all about them, that they were murderers, that they were sick, that they were baby killers, and so forth. And he took over the Republican Party, and he looked like a winner. So people started imitating him. And by the time of the 2016 Republican primary, if you wanted to be the nominee, you had to lie. You couldn't be elected if you told the truth, because the party and its voters were had been so conditioned to nothing but lies. Now, Trump took that a step even further as a candidate with the Obama birther lie, which, by the way, a majority of Republicans believed at the time.
I know that, right?
That one is crazy enough. The really crazy one is that I think 40% of Republican voters believe that Hillary Clinton was running a pedophile ring out of a pizza.
Isn't that something?
In Washington. So the media bear a significant degree of blame for this, because they watch the Republicans walk away from reality, lie about climate change, lie about the president's birth, and they treated it as on the one hand, on the other hand. They gave people both sides. And when they would have, when these guys would be on Meet the Press, like John Boehner, the majority leader, they would say, "Don't you think Obama was born in the United States?" And he would say, "Well, I don't really want to talk about that. It's up to people to believe whatever." So the Republican Party,
which
ran
is
away from
effectively
reality.
a lie, by the way. He's effectively lying when he says that, and he knows it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the reporters ate it up because he was fun. They liked him. He had a sense of humor. He was winking at them, and they were winking back. And the
Right.
people who weren't getting winked at were believing it. So you know, it's hard to describe Donald Trump in a shorthand, because there's so much awfulness about him. It takes, in my Nation column, it always takes up too much time to say why this man shouldn't be president. The best shorthand description I saw a few weeks ago was belongs in a prison psych ward, and that speaks to a lot of his problems. So Biden is 8 points up over a guy who belongs in a prison psych ward,
Isn't that something?
who might be close enough to win the election. The media treat this man who belongs in a prison psych ward not very differently than they treated Barack Obama. Who,
As
by
if
the way,
he's a legitimate candidate for president. He's
Right.
not a
Barack
legitimate
Obama-
candidate. He might be president, but he's not a legitimate candidate for president.
according to the New York Times, you know, they were getting hassled by their readers. Well, didn't Obama lie? Obama told 18 falsehoods in 8 years. Never the same one twice. Corrected every one when he found out that it was wrong. Trump really has told 18 falsehoods in 15 minutes.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Right.
And yet they're treated just about equivalently. And that has opened a path to an American form of fascism. We're about 50-50 if we're going to get it. It's really incredibly puzzling. I don't understand. I mean, maybe you have some insights. I don't understand Dean Beckett. I don't understand why he doesn't think the country is threatened and the New York Times is the place to say it. I don't get why he thinks it's more important to preserve the image of the New York Times as nonpartisan than to save the country from this threat.
I'm going to agree with you. I think that the Times, but also the other major media outlets have failed in their refusal to acknowledge the threat to our government and our way of life that we're experiencing even as we speak. We've only got a minute or so left. Perhaps you can just touch on the issue of the role of the media in the rise of Donald Trump. I mean, the kind of fawning coverage he got, or the billions and billions of dollars in free media. It wasn't just Fox News, it was CNN and other outlets. Talk a little bit about the way the media promoted this guy.
Well, you know, Trump is a moron, but he's also a genius. He's a genius for the way he controls the media, the way he's got one shiny object after another. And he was right when he kept saying they love me because I'm making them so much money. CNN was actually far worse than Fox. during the election. Roger Ailes didn't want Trump to win the nomination. He eventually gave in. Rupert Murdoch gave him instructions to give in. But
Right.
CNN loved Trump. And Jeff Zucker, as you know, played a very important role in promoting Trump's entire career before he was at CNN.
Right.
And while he was at CNN, he hired people like Kelly McAnany and others just to defend Trump because honest journalists couldn't do it. The thing I found most shocking and still do is he hired, after Corey Lewandowski was fired as Trump's campaign chair, and after he punched a reporter, a female reporter, although that wasn't the reason, he was hired by CNN as a commentator, and he had signed a non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement with the campaign. So he was legally enjoined from telling the truth.
A blatant outrage, which I wish we had more time because there's so much more in your book. We're going to have to leave it right there. Thank you, Eric Alterman, and to our viewers, thank you for watching. We'll see you again next time.